You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good. Finally back at home and not traveling all over the stinking place. So, but no, I hung out with the kids. Happy belated Father's Day to the dads watching. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers for lifting Lord Stanley's Cup for the second year in a row. Yeah, other than that, we're just plugging right along, man. How are you guys?
The NHL is kind of becoming a streaky league, right? Like we saw it there for a little bit. The Lightning were really good because you can keep your core together. So we might see the Panthers sticking around for another year or two, and then typically salary cap issues hit, and then you have to break that up and figure it out. But we kind of saw it with the Blackhawks, right? The Bruins were good there for a while. The Lightning, the Avs have been good. They've not been raising the cup multiple years good, but yeah. Congrats to the Florida Panthers. Canada once again invented the sport and does not get to celebrate it with the trophy that they made. Thank you for your contributions, Canada. We had like OTAs and stuff last week. Quickly before we get into this, have you guys seen the story out of Cincinnati? It's real pertinent around my parts because Shamar Stewart is like not participating. Their first round draft pick is not participating in OTAs because of a contract clause, and he just left. Like, that's crazy to me. We've heard of some pretty wild contract clauses, but like for him to just not even sign his rookie deal, it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I haven't heard exactly what it is. So I did see that he hasn't been signed. I did see that he left, but I've been, I guess, out of touch with exactly what the language is that's holding him or the Cincinnati Bengals up from being able to mutually agree on the contract.
I can't remember if it's a morality or a performance clause, but in any effect, it's something that has never appeared in any rookie's contract. It's certainly not a Bengals rookie's contract, but it is something that it's potential voids on future guaranteed money. That's what the language is, that it could potentially void future guaranteed money. So I don't know. I
don't blame him.
Right?
Yeah,
If that's what it is, I don't care what it is. Like,
yeah,
you only get so many shots at getting paid, so I don't blame him. Guarantee the money, get me in there, or don't.
But I saw some reports too coming out that he was potentially planning on just not even, not rocking and rolling this year, potentially sitting out and then re-entering the draft next year if they can't come to terms on that. And
so he still has a year of college eligibility, and with the new NIL rules, he could go back. He does not lose his amateur status because that doesn't exist anymore. So it's going to be a fascinating case study as to what the NFL and these players will do, because now the NFL has kind of lost its bargaining chip, right? Like, hey, you come to the NFL because you're going to make money that you weren't making in college. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. You're going to make money in college, and you might, in the case of Shedeur Sanders, right? The report is out there that his rookie contract is worth less than what he was making in NIL money at Colorado. So maybe the NFL isn't the end all be all anymore.
Yeah, there's a get off my lawn moment somewhere in there, but I think I've hashed that out a couple different times on this show.
Probably. We can move on.
Right. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one comes to play and all of that comes out. So any other kind of news, notes, anything else that we want to hit up here before we start kind of rocking and rolling into this?
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
J.K. Dobbins signing with the Denver Broncos.
Mhm.
How
Does that do anything for you?
it actually does. So Dobbins, when healthy, is a very effective running back, right? Like he is not Saquon Barkley by any stretch, but J.K. Dobbins has produced when healthy. He has a knack for the end zone. He's solid in pass pro, and he brings a veteran presence.
Right.
And really, that's what the Broncos needed. You had Estime, McLaughlin, and Harvey. You needed a veteran presence to kind of help lead that room and everything else, and the Broncos and Dobbins were able to kind of find that, and I think it'll be good. You know, Dobbins had played for both Harbaughs, completely different style of coaching than what Sean Payton has, but I think it can bring a very good level of expectation and a way to prepare and to learn how to prepare for a season correctly and a week correctly. So I like it definitely for the locker room. I don't love it for my RJ Harvey shares this year, but I think it's just a year. I think, you teach them how to play, you get them in, you kind of rotate the guys through, that way none of them burn out, and you see what you have.
Right. Well, and I think we may have talked about this a little bit last week, Alex, but I do like that from the standpoint too that this is a little bit of potential, Mark Ingram type of role is what I could see him kind of fulfilling in the Sean Payton offense, right? The between the tackle guy, he's still good in pass pro, but a little bit more of that thumper, where allows RJ Harvey to really kind of be the outside the tackles type of running back and really get in the passing work side of things. So I do think
I
that
like that. I like that because we saw it with Jamal Williams too.
Right.
Really, the only the one guy in Sean Payton's tenure that role didn't really work out with was AP.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could like that. Like it brings a weapon at this point. Like I
Well, I think
for fantasy,
biggest
I find a way to dodge around it, especially as we get closer and some more information comes up. But for being a Broncos fan, I do like the move. Like
Right.
I understand the need. I think that holistically it makes the team better on a bunch of different levels. And it brings a guy in who Sean Payton can lean on for accountability.
Right. Well, I like it too from a best ball perspective, right? Doing several of those right now. And I like it because J.K. Dobbins is super deep in most drafts right now, to the point where you're starting to throw darts anyway when you get in there. But this is a guy that potentially could have a decent role and potentially pop off 1 or 2 weeks, and he's in a range where if you get one serviceable week out of that guy in that range, can do some big things. So if he does end up having a little bit bigger role, kind of filling into that Mark Ingram type of role, I think that could be some really good things from a best ball perspective as well. I don't necessarily want to have to try and figure that out on a redraft type of situation right now, but for best ball, it's worth a dart throw that late.
So. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is that it takes the pressure off those young guys. I mean, you look at that running back room, and Jaleel McLaughlin is the elder statesman before J.K. Dobbins comes in, right? Or Estime is the elder, one of those two. It's the elder statesman entering his third season in the NFL, right? So yeah, McLaughlin's there entering his third season, and Estime's a pick from last year.
Same with Batty.
Harvey's a pick from this year. So J.K. Dobbins at the ripe old age of 26 is now the calming voice in the room. Ripe old age of 26, but he's been in the league since 2020. So it is a nice thing as a Broncos fan. That is encouraging. As a fantasy player, it will be interesting to see how they intend to use him.
All right. So, all righty. Any other thoughts? Any other news notes we want to hit up?
I don't believe
Nothing
so.
super crazy. I know you guys already touched on the Rodgers thing, so
Yeah,
I'm not going to worry about that.
We did.
All righty. Let's real quick before we start getting into our breakdowns and everything else this episode, let's go ahead and hit up some of the comments. We have some folks chiming in here. Jamie chiming in over YouTube saying sup dudes, Binkin saying sup fellas, and Vince saying good day legends, what's going on? Vince also saying hey to Jamie over there. Binkin saying that they're prepping for their first best ball draft, hoping to get some insight that will help. Any thoughts, any insight for Binkin on this best ball?
Have fun with the first one, right?
Yeah.
The best thing about best ball is you do a bunch of them typically, right? You don't generally just do one or two. So you get to kind of learn where some guys are falling, in certain ranges that you like. Obviously tonight's going to be pretty tight end centric. So, hopefully we're able to kind of help out in that avenue. But a lot of it's where you're picking, what strategy you want to employ. Are you going to be looking for stacks, or are you just going to kind of see how this one goes? So the first one, you're able to bob and weave a little bit until you get in. Now, I'll tell you, with some of the news, like an RJ Harvey, he's probably a little elevated up the draft board. So maybe you don't want to be drafting RJ Harvey, where he's currently going off the board, but maybe the J.K. Dobbins news is starting to scare some people off, and you can get him at a couple rounds back and probably closer to his true value.
All right. Alex, any thoughts for Binkin on its best ball strategy?
Yeah, I like what Kevin said with, like, it just gives you an idea, and it's ones that you can do all the time, like, because it is a set it and forget it situation. So yeah, it gives you an idea for when you start doing some redraft stuff, like where kind of guys are being valued.
Right. It's a couple of things that I kind of look for Binkin and would be my bits of advice for the first one out there, right? Like Kevin said, have fun with it. Let the board come to you, right? Like don't chase guys in that. You want to know your format in there as well, right? Like if it's a 3 wide receiver best ball league, you need to focus on wide receivers a little bit heavier there and if it's only 2 running backs, right? If it's kind of split down the middle, then you stay a little bit more balanced there and really kind of, rock and roll through that. So that would be some of that. Know your tiers, right? We talk about the tiers all the time when it comes to draft strategies. Know your tiers, how you have those guys broken out. That will be tremendously helpful when looking into that. And then, that's one of those two that I wouldn't necessarily like look to spend up early on quarterbacks or on tight ends. In a lot of cases, those are right. There is such a thing, yes, as positional advantage, but if you're going to be doing a best ball and you've got 3 quarterbacks on there, right, get yourself a quarterback by committee type of approach. Same thing with a tight end by committee type of approach, and get some guys that have the potential to pop off a couple of times in the week. But you're not necessarily looking for the top end guys that are going to be, finishing at that as a positional advantage through that. Because with the best ball, you can rotate through that and play that in the aggregate and come out just as well, if not ahead. So any other thoughts on that one?
Here's one that I try to employ is you can go quarterback early, or you can go tight end early if you choose to fall into those, but don't go both. Don't go both early.
Right.
You can go both late if that's what you choose to do too, and just load up on receiver and running back, but don't go quarterback and tight end early. because what you think you're taking as a positional advantage, you end up giving it all back in running back and wide receiver if you're going both. So
Right.
one or the other, or you wait on both.
And especially in those formats like best ball where you don't have to pick a tight end to start, right? Like you're not picking a set it and forget it tight end or a set it and forget it quarterback. That's where you can really kind of make some hay on that one. And I like Kevin's thoughts there. Real quick before we move into the tight ends, Bink is saying Dobbins could be impactful if healthy late in the season. Vince saying Dobbins spelling RJ should help Harvey for later in the season. Dobbins isn't exactly a pillar of health, so fresh legs of Harvey in the late season could be a smash play. So I think all of those are some good takes there.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
All righty. Well, let's go ahead and we're going to take a look here at some tight ends and what that looks like and what that works here. And as soon as I can get my my computer to play nice here. Alex, we may have the same situation. So last week it was a whole thing with trying to get this thing to work, Kevin.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. Looks like we're finally getting that going. Okay. So first up, we're gonna start with the tight ends. We're starting tight end 24 and kind of working our way on down the list here. And so first up, we've got Cade Otton. Cade Otton last year, 87 targets, 59 receptions, 600 yards, 4 touchdowns. Thoughts on Cade Otton?
So a lot of Cade Otton's production came pretty late last year with the injuries to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. And so I think 24 is probably pretty safe. He's just not high enough on the pecking order in Tampa Bay's offense. On top of the fact that they drafted Mbuka to kind of have some insurance at receiver, and you have Johnson, who did really well for him last year too. There's just it's not a tight end centric offense. So he's going to have a couple splash weeks for sure. Maybe he ends up with 70 yards and a touchdown one week, but definitely a second or third tight end option for a best ball league. He's not the guy that you want to start your room with, but it is a pretty explosive offense. They do put a lot of points up on the board. So, if he's able to improve from 4 touchdowns to 6, even if he regresses to 50 catches, it's a net gain there. So there's a flyer to be taken, but he is not the guy I'm hitching my wagon to.
Yeah. If we could extrapolate out weeks 7 through 10, and if he was that productive all year, like this dude's probably tight end 1, because he was on fire for that 4-week stretch. But that was because no Chris Godwin, no Mike Evans down there in Tampa. So for that 4-week stretch, Cade Otton was a ton of fun. And I had some shares of him last year during that 4-week stretch, but it was slim pickings once those guys came back, and then he didn't play the last 3 games of the season. So I think where he's at is a fair value for him. It is not a guy that I'm looking to draft in any way, shape, or form. He's a stringer candidate. But you bet your backside if I see some of those receivers getting hurt again down in Tampa, hunting where Cade Otton is.
Right. And I'm pretty much kind of jumping on that bandwagon there, right? Like this is one of those that as a streamer type of candidate, as a late dart throw in a best ball as your 3rd or 4th tight end on that, like I'm okay with that there. But if I'm looking at redraft, certainly not a guy that I want as even my second, if I'm rostering 2 tight ends, or if I'm going super late tight end, like this isn't the guy I'm looking for. This is a guy that I would leave on the waiver wire and pick up as needed and stream that type of thing, because I do think that this is going to be one of those that he does become very much kind of the forgotten guy with the return of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin potentially returning here, them spending the 1st round pick on Mbuka, and Jalen McMillan had a very productive rookie season last year as well. So this is one of those that very well could be the odd man out when it comes to production this year. So I'm not looking to spend much draft capital on Cade Otton. Any other thoughts on Cade Otton? Alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about Mike Gesicki. And Mike Gesicki last year, 65 receptions, 83 targets, 665 yards through the air, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Mike Gesicki?
I think Gesicki sees some more touchdowns this year. I think 2 is a pretty low number for him, being in a pass happy offense and him being a really good receiving tight end. He's just been a little bit undervalued. So I like him there in Cincinnati. Again, second tight end option. I don't mind him for best ball being a second or third option again, just because you're going to see 1 or 2 weeks where he does crack the top 10 and kind of jump off the page there. There's just a lot going on in Cincinnati. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, all these guys are going to see a good amount, obviously. And then they brought back P. Ryan, which is interesting enough, only because I think it's just another mouth that they're going to script touches to. So I think the upside's there because you want to have pieces of high profile offenses, and much like Cade Otton in Tampa Bay, Cincinnati absolutely has one as well. So almost kind of mirror images of each other, even though Gesicki is a better natural receiver of the football.
I agree with that they're almost mirror images, because it's kind of how I'm looking at them. I think Mike Gesicki is the third pass catching, unless something drastically changes in the next 6 weeks. Mike Gesicki is the third pass catching option on that team, right? But that is 2 other large mouths you have to feed when it comes to throwing the football, and then of course you've got all the running backs that they're going to do. Zach Moss also back there in the backfield for Cincinnati right now. So if we see a T. Higgins injury or a Jamar Chase injury, then I think his value skyrockets. If we don't, then I think he's a tough play week in and week out.
Yeah, this is a guy that I would put on my roster as a potential streamer. Not necessarily a guy that I would look to add as my late round tight end dart throw. Hope to strike gold on this one. And you guys mentioned both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who are going to drastically outproduce Gesicki when it comes to targets and all of that, right? Because when both of those guys were on the field, typically, Gesicki saw less than about 5 targets a game, which dramatically impacts the value that he's able to produce for you in fantasy, right? Now, if one of those guys should happen to miss some time, like that's where I would look to try and add him to my roster and try to make some things there, because, right, with them both in the lineup last year, we saw him only, not even at 5 targets, where when like T. Higgins missed some time towards the end of the season, I'm sorry, when T. Higgins missed some time last season, we saw Gesicki over 5 catches per game on that one. So there's certainly some value there, but this is another guy that, with both of those guys and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins being healthy, I do think that Mike Gesicki becomes kind of the odd man out and the forgotten guy when it comes to this passing attack. Any other thoughts on Mike Gesicki? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Brenton Strange. And Brenton Strange last season, 40 receptions, 53 targets, 411 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Brenton Strange?
So Strange is kind of one of those guys. I would actually draft him after Gesicki and Cade Otton. So this is one of those instances where I'm disagreeing with the consensus rankings a little bit. Part of it's Trevor Lawrence. Part of it's the fact that they have some more mouths to feed there in Jacksonville. It's just that's not where my late round flyer is going to go. Is in a team that is just below mediocre as far as offensive production goes. Couple in the fact that they have like a 7-headed monster at running back. Like there's just Jacksonville is not that dynamic, right? Like there's just not going to be that many balls to go around and kind of keep everybody fed. So where Brenton Strange is going to be, probably most utilized is in line and blocking more often than not. Try and give Trevor Lawrence a chance to get it down the field to Brian Thomas and to Travis Hunter. So he's kind of one of those guys where I'm really not taking any flyers on him. Like I just don't see enough of an upside to take him as a second tight end, and go off of that. Maybe we'll see it differently once the offense kind of develops in Jacksonville a little bit. But for right now, I'm looking some other places, and I am kind of avoiding Brenton Strange.
Yeah, it's a shame too because it's his show down there. Evan Ingram leaving to go to Denver, so it's just to your point, Kevin. I just don't see where he gets his touches, like his value. So I think there's better shot of Otten or Gesicki getting their work closer to the end zone. I think I have no reason to believe this, but I feel like Jacksonville is going to be kind of gadgety this year and trying to find ways to get Travis Hunter involved in areas that maybe they shouldn't. Maybe almost like Cordell Patterson with the Vikings when he first came out, just like freak athlete. We got to get the ball in his hands somehow. And that didn't really work out for them. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they learned lessons from the past, but as it pertains to Brenton Strange, he is also not a guy I am searching out to add to my roster when on draft day.
Okay, I will. I'll be the odd person out on this one then. So with Brenton Strange, right, and really, I'm kind of looking at the time that Evan Ingram missed last season, right? So he missed 4 games, kind of right off the bat, and in those four games, 3 of the 4 games, Brenton Strange was a top 10 tight end. And I do think that there is some very intriguing upside with him. So much so to the point that I really like taking Brenton Strange late in a best ball format, right? Taking him as like my 3rd tight end, really liking that one and trying to bring that thing home that way. But don't mind taking him as a late round kind of shot as when I'm looking at redraft, things like that. Like if I'm going tight end late, this is a guy that has some intriguing upside to me. And yes, there's certainly some things to be said about, Brian Thomas Jr. taking that next step, Travis Hunter being another weapon in there. But this is a team that also lost several key contributors from previous years, with Christian Kirk going down throughout the season last year. Evan Ingram no longer there as well. And this is one that we've seen Trevor Lawrence really target a tight end in seasons past with Evan Ingram. And could it be that was because of Evan Ingram, or could it be because that's where Trevor Lawrence likes looking, is that part of the field and where the tight end's running those routes? That part remains to be seen, but I'm willing to take the shot and the flyer on this one for a late tight end. Any other thoughts on Brenton Strange? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Zach Ertz. And Zach Ertz last year, 66 receptions, 91 targets, 654 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Zach Ertz?
I think the addition of Deebo Samuel in Washington is really going to eat into some of the routes that Zach Ertz was able to be productive on. Again, maybe we'll see it differently, but we saw that that's kind of Deebo's route tree, right? Deebo's in the middle of the field. He moves the chains, big body. Yes, he can be explosive. But when you have McLaurin on the outside, you don't need Deebo to be down the field explosive. You need him to, find the hole of the zone and sit down and keep the ball moving. So I am a little worried about Ertz this year. Because I think we see some regression with the addition of Deebo and another year of Jaden Daniels developing a little bit. So I still think you're going to see some production out of Ertz, but because of Debo, your ceiling's kind of capped. And in a best ball format, you kind of want those pop weeks where you're drafting him. You do get fair value, right? Like it's not, you're drafting him late enough that you need him to crack your starting lineup once. If he gets there twice, theoretically, that's money in the bank from where you're drafting Zach Ertz. I do think that will happen. But holistically, I'm intrigued, but it's got to be the right situation, and I'm going to have to really like how my roster is kind of constructed when he's coming up on the board. Otherwise, I'm probably going to forego Zach Ertz just because of the unknown.
So I like Zach Ertz a lot. Super intrigued by him in a best ball format because the touchdown upside is there, but you can't account for touchdowns week in, week out, right? We saw him go off the last bit of the season with touchdowns. And, if you had him those weeks, it was probably pretty beneficial in your playoff run, right? So he scores touchdowns in week 11, week 12, week 13. The week 14 bye last week was brutal. Their bye this week is week 12, so that's also brutal. But I like him in best ball formats because of that touchdown upside. I think he's not a consistent start play for me. But I do like where he's at with the quarterback that he is, the rapport he's developing with his quarterback.
Right. No, I mean, that's the one good thing about Zach Ertz is that, yeah, he's a tight end that's really not going to go out there and get you a goose egg on that one, right? Like Zach Ertz, very consistently the 4 for 40 guy, right? If he falls into the end zone, yeah, he'll get you a usable week. If he doesn't, he's not going to goose egg you and lose you the week, but it's not going to be an overly great week for you out of the position as well. So one of those that, if I'm kind of punting the position altogether when it comes to tight ends for redraft, yep, Zach Ertz is a guy that I'll look at just from a standpoint of I can have him on my roster. I'll likely get that 5 to 6 points out of him in a half point PPR league, and I get a goose egg. It'll allow me to really hone my roster in some other areas to try and bring that thing home. And a best ball format, right? Like it's if he happens to fall into the end zone, that'll be a usable week. And if he doesn't, it's hopefully he was your third tight end that you put on that the roster in that type of format. So I'm kind of lukewarm as far as the feelings on Zach Ertz this season, and it really just comes down to the situation in which I'd be putting him on my roster, and if I feel confident in all of my other positions to just punt the tight end way down the board. Any other thoughts on Zach Ertz? All right, let's go ahead up and head on over and talk about Hunter Henry. And Hunter Henry last year, 66 receptions, 97 targets, 674 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Hunter Henry?
So Henry's a guy that I like a lot coming into 2025, and I think he's a guy who could pretty easily jump his way up this list as far as final standings go. I do think Drake May did enough, right? We're going to see if he can and take that next step in his sophomore season. Obviously, the new coaching staff in New England, but it all does come down to, where are your weapons? Is Diggs going to be ready to go? But I do think Hunter Henry proves a good red zone target for Drake May. And I do think that he did enough that even with Austin Hooper around, Hunter Henry is going to be probably at least a scripted in point of this offense, right? So he averaged 6 targets a game last year, 66 receptions. So I see numbers like that. It's the 2 touchdowns. I think he ends up with at least 4. So I do think we see a bump out of there. So even if the numbers hold the same, get a couple extra touchdowns. I mean, hell, guys, he finished tied in 12 and half point PPR scoring last year. I don't see him taking a big step back. I mean, I understand the receiving yards and the receptions both were career highs for him, but it didn't seem like it was all too difficult to get to that mark with Drake May under center. So I see another step forward, and he's a guy for like a second tight end I'm absolutely targeting because I think there's a ton of value to be had there, and being able to capitalize on weeks where New England's probably still going to be trailing quite a few games in the fourth quarter, right? They're not terrible. It's not a terrible team. I just don't know that they're talented enough to be leading a whole lot of football games in the fourth quarter. So it might be kind of ugly how you get some of these points, but for fantasy, it doesn't really matter whether they come in the first quarter or the fourth quarter, right? It all accounts to that bottom line. So I'm a go for Hunter Henry this year.
I'm not sure why he's this far down. You're right, Kevin. Tight end 12 last year. I guess the touchdowns is what is scaring people. But I mean, they're not playing a terribly difficult schedule, right? So their seventh strength of schedule this year. There aren't a ton of teams on this schedule that scare me more than New England scares me. So they'll be competitive in those games. So yeah, I'm not sure why he's being faded so much in this, other than simply the Stephon Diggs effect, I guess, is maybe what that is. That's probably what is driving down his tight end value is the fact that Stephon Diggs is now in town. But I mean, I think it's a fair game again in best ball. These guys in this back half are kind of all best ball picks for me, because I typically only draft one tight end and then I stream. It's just a strategy that I've kind of employed. So I think he's a fine best ball pick, and I'm trying to figure out why he's so far down after finishing tight end 12 last year.
Yeah, I do think there's some value here when it comes to Hunter Henry, right? When it's he and Drake May certainly did seem to build some chemistry early on in the season, and you saw that kind of continue through it. This is a team that still had a lot of growing pains last year. And I do think that we see some positive regression when it comes to touchdowns in this one, and see him a little bit more kind of around that mean. And I'm pretty close to where Kevin is. I think 4 or 5 touchdowns sounds about right for him. Still probably around 600 yards. So I could very well see him in a low end tight end 1, right? Like finishing anywhere from tight end 11 to tight end 15 on this one. So I do see some tremendous value when it comes to this, and certainly a guy that I don't mind taking as my like a late round tight end type of strategy. Any other thoughts on Hunter Henry? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Pat Freiermuth. And Pat Freiermuth last year, 65 receptions, 78 targets, 653 yards, 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Pat Freiermuth?
So the biggest wild card about Pat Freiermuth is Aaron Rodgers. And the good thing is we've seen plenty of offenses with Aaron Rodgers at the helm where the tight end is valuable. He did it, multiple seasons in Green Bay. His healthy year last year in New York, we saw some production out of the tight end spot. Not as much once Devontae Adams came into town, but before then we did see some healthy tight end play. There's not a whole lot of options in Pittsburgh, right? And I think if Aaron Rodgers, and this is a big if, but if Aaron Rodgers realizes where he's at physically, right? His fastball doesn't quite have as much zip on it, but mentally he still sees the game extremely well. So if he's able to deliver on time, maybe you're not seeing as many of those deep routes, but you don't have, you have DK, which is great to have. You have DK, and so he will get fed, but Freiermuth, I don't mind the flyer on him. Like I see a path there where he can, you know, maintain his 65 to, you know, maybe 70 receptions for the season. But I think what you might see is his yardage increase. You could see him jump from 650 yards closer to 800 yards, which I think you need. 7 touchdowns is going to be hard for Frymouth to repeat. So we'll see kind of how it all shakes out in the end. So tight end 10 last year, extremely quietly tight end 10 last year. So do I think he gets inside the top 10 again this year? No, I don't, but I think that has more to do with the health of players in front of him, more so than anything else. So again, solid number 2. I don't mind Pat Freiermuth here. We've seen good results from the tight end play, with Aaron Rodgers under center here. So I'm definitely not afraid of this.
Yeah, cosign, especially given what this receiving core kind of is right now and just the newness of it. And not that Aaron Rodgers needs a security blanket, but a great pass catching tight end solves all kinds of ills. So as long as he can stay on Rodgers' good side, I think Freiermuth's got himself a comfortable season as a comfortably in tight end 2 territory.
Yeah, I think that there is some value in this draft capital here because, again, this is a guy that I think may sneak into back end tight end 1 territory, but I do think that we're still going to see him to the upper to mid range of tight end. So this feels like you're kind of drafting him at the very floor of what you could get here, right? And we've seen, to Kevin's point, we have seen Aaron Rodgers really focus in on tight ends in the past and produce some great fantasy production, right? Like, remembering not even that many seasons ago, Robert Tonyan was tight end 2 on the season. And I think do I think we see that out of Pat Freiermuth, that kind of finish? No, this season, but I also think that there's some tremendous value when it's all said and done because the offensive coordinator is still Arthur Smith, and Arthur Smith does very much like to use tight ends and bring that thing home that way. The only issue is that oftentimes Arthur Smith likes to use a lot of different tight ends, and that could potentially cause some issues there. Haven't seen any further updates about the Steelers trying to go and bring in Jonnu Smith, but there have been several rumors floating around off season around that one and trade rumors. So be interesting to see how that thing finishes playing out. But I do think that there is still some tremendous value when drafting Pat Freiermuth at this position. Any other thoughts on Pat Freiermuth? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely is coming off the board kind of tight end 18 currently. Last season, Isaiah Likely had 42 receptions, 58 targets, 477 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Isaiah Likely?
So if I'm drafting Andrews, I am making it a point to draft Likely. I think we said this last year as well. But here's the kicker with Likely, right? If you take away his week 1 performance, 9 receptions, 111 yards, a touchdown, and a big toe away from beating Kansas City, you take that game away and he is right back to the dang near untouchable tight end 2 that he had been this first couple of years. So it is a roller coaster. If Andrews misses time, Likely is extremely valuable. He steps right into that role and does it very well. It's continuing to find ways to get both tight ends involved in the offense and keep them relevant. So standalone value, I'm probably not drafting Likely. But if I have Mark Andrews, I am drafting Likely, and it almost doesn't matter the format to me in that situation. So he's extremely athletic. He's on the last year of his rookie contract, so he's playing for something, right? We all like a guy in a contract year. We say that plenty of times in our show. So if nothing else, that does make me lean towards him a little bit and thinking that he will improve in total upon his numbers last year, knowing that he wants to get paid and he wants to play. It's just a matter of whether Baltimore is going to be the team that kind of pays him and they move on from Mark Andrews after this year, or if Likely says, okay, my time in Baltimore has come to an end, I'm going to go to X, name your team, and take my talents there and try and be a true number one on my own.
Yeah, co-sign on that. I think that there are a handful of guys that we've already talked about that I'd rather have standalone than Isaiah Likely. But if there is such a thing as a tight end handcuff, this is it. Like this is what it is. And Andrews has proven that health is not his strong suit. So it is a no-brainer if you've got Mark Andrews that you got to grab Isaiah Likely. But again, otherwise, I don't think that he's all that.
So, yeah, I would agree. This is Isaiah Likely is a guy that at this point I'm not looking to draft. I'm not looking to add on to my rosters. Just from the standpoint that, you're with the way things are kind of currently setting and way things would project out, you're drafting him at his ceiling at tight end 16, right? Like, unless I absolutely need to try and do a handcuff type of thing, like I'm not looking to draft him. I'll let somebody else deal with that one there, because as long as Mark Andrews is in the lineup, I don't know that you're going to see Isaiah Likely be able to outproduce tight end 16 on the season. So that's kind of where I'm at, and he's almost in that do not draft list for me this season, with especially with where he's coming off the board. Any other thoughts on Isaiah Likely? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to Kyle Pitts. And Kyle Pitts last season, 74 receptions. I'm sorry. Kyle Pitts last season, 47 receptions, 74 targets, 602 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Thoughts on Kyle Pitts?
You just brought up your do not draft list. This guy is probably at the top of mine. Disappointing season after disappointing season. He's already fighting a foot injury this year. It really hasn't mattered who the quarterback is. We've gone through 2 different offensive coordinators now. Like, Kyle Pitts, it might just be that he is one of those guys who is an athletic freak for his position and did jump off the page with his metrics that, we got one decent season his rookie year, and other than that, we're just staying away. So there is some underlying intrigue, yes. I think there always will be with Kyle Pitts, but with where he's going off the board, I'm kind of staying away from it. A couple weeks ago, he was about 10 spots lower, and there I was drafting a little bit of Kyle Pitts, right? Because then he's your clear tight end number 3. If he splashes a week, especially for best ball, okay, great. I'm not carrying 3 tight ends in a redraft, so it's not anything that I was super worried about. And now he's high enough up the board that I've been burned too many times. And so for me, Kyle Pitts is a no-fly zone. I'm not going anywhere near it.
Top of all of that, he's dealing, as we sit here and talk on June 17th, he's dealing with an injury. There's trade rumors flying over him. Who knows what you're getting if you drafted Kyle Pitts and he's still playing for the Falcons, or how much he's going to be playing. So I'm intrigued, but I think only in a best ball format. I don't think I want to deal with the headache of Kyle Pitts in a redraft where I need to plug somebody in, week out.
There's teams I'd definitely be interested in Kyle Pitts if he went to, though.
Yeah.
If he went to Tennessee or Houston, I'd instantly be interested. And I'm only saying that because I don't think Atlanta's going to trade him to an NFC team. A team like the Rams might be a little interesting to see Kyle Pitts there. But the options are rather limited.
Right. And see, I actually don't mind Kyle Pitts with where he's coming off the board currently, right? And right, like some of that you said right there is a lot of that in previous season folks have been very burnt by Kyle Pitts and where they took him, because in most seasons before you were having to draft him at tight end 6, tight end 7, like you were having to spend some good mid-round capital or even upper end capital to start putting him on your roster. Whereas when he's coming off the board at tight end 17 and in that 12th, 13th round type of deal, I don't really have a problem adding him onto my roster as my potential second tight end, or even taking a dart throw at a late tight end. But this is one of those that I don't know that you get a ton of value, ton of upside with Kyle Pitts, but this is one of those that I don't know that we're going to see him necessarily perform below tight end 17 on this one. I think when it's all said and done, we probably see him return tight end 13, 14, 15 on the season. So there may be some slight value there, but not a guy that I'm necessarily looking to take as my late tight end, flyer shot to try and make that thing happen. But this is a guy that could be used in a pinch when it comes to streaming, and it does have some potential like second tight end on your roster type of value there. Any other thoughts on Kyle Pitts? All righty, let's go ahead and take a look at Jake Ferguson. And Jake Ferguson last year, 59 receptions, 86 targets, 494 yards, and no touchdowns through the year. Thoughts on Jake Ferguson?
So Ferg is a guy that I am absolutely targeting. I think that a lot of people got scared off of him last year, but between him being a little nicked up, with Dak being nicked up, and then having to run with Cooper Rush or Trey Lance under center, obviously no touchdowns, only 59 receptions. It was a pretty bad year. So I'm buying the bounce is what I'm buying here with Jake Ferguson. And I do think he's a guy who's capable of flirting with tight end 10, 11, 12. So you get a bit of value here. So if I'm waiting on tight end, Jake Ferguson is a guy that I am keeping an eye on, that I'm looking at, who I think can bounce back from last year a little bit in right, wrong, or indifferent, a team that's going to need him. Yes, they brought in Pickens to go with CeeDee Lamb, but that still leaves Jake Ferguson as a third mouth to feed in an offense that does pass it quite a bit still. So I'm not overly shy about this one. So he has my stamp of approval here, especially with where he's going. I do like Jake Ferguson this year.
Yeah, I think obviously his 2023 year is more indicative than his 2024 year, just with Dak presumably healthy, with what they are going to need out of him. It was a disappointing year for him, but really to no fault of his own, because he didn't have a good quarterback thrown to him. So I like the fact that he's being valued down here in the 16 range. I could easily see him being up in this. For sure, there's at least one guy that I think he finishes well ahead of that's going earlier than him. We'll talk about him in a little bit. No, we won't talk about him tonight. So it's Colston Loveland. I don't think Colston Loveland's going to finish tight end 12. I just don't. It's hard for rookie tight ends to have that big of an impact. So I could see Ferguson finishing well above him, which there's your value, right? He's finishing above where he's being drafted at.
Okay. And I could certainly see Jake Ferguson, right, as Kevin said, having a little bit of the bounce, right, on this season here, seeing a little bit of the bounce back. This is one that Dallas has a rather tough strength of schedule when it comes to it, especially out of the tight end type of position here. But I do think that you're drafting him at his absolute ceiling, or I'm sorry, at his absolute floor, with where he's coming off the board. This is again one of those that Alex brought up the 2023 season. I do think that we see something, a little bit more of a return to form on that one. Because when I'm looking at this thing, I do think that we're probably somewhere in that 65 to 70 receptions, somewhere on that 600 to 700 yards, and probably a handful of touchdowns. So I do think that we see a little bit of return to form on that one there. And when it's all said and done, that's you're probably looking, ceiling of tight end 8-9, but a floor of tight end 15. So you're still getting a little bit of potential value on that one. Any other thoughts on Jake Ferguson?
So just a quick note. In 2023, Jake Ferguson had 25 red zone targets. Of those 25 red zone targets, 12 came inside the 10-yard line. And all in total, 8 touchdowns out of those 25 red zone targets. Last year, 6 red zone targets, obviously none for the year, only 3 inside the 10-yard line. So I don't think he's going to be as good as 2023, but I definitely think it's going to be better than last year. To Alex's point earlier, how we think 23 is probably a little bit closer to the norm. So that's part of the reason, right? Being able to put some simple numbers, why I said earlier that I am buying that bounce. Like, if nothing else, the touchdowns should speak for this. If he ends up with 4, I don't need him to have 8, but if he has 4 touchdowns and 700 yards, that's money in the bank from where you're drafting him.
All righty. I like it. Any other thoughts on Jake Ferguson? All righty. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Dallas Goedert. And Dallas Goedert last year, 42 receptions, 52 targets, 496 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Dallas Goedert?
This is a guy who's overinflated, in my opinion. Dallas Goedert is kind of one of those guys. He is a very good NFL player, and he brings a lot to this Eagles offense as a physical player. The fantasy game, no, not as much. The Eagles have a pretty skinny target tree between A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and then you still have Jalen Hurts, who's going to get his on the ground as well. So it just doesn't lead as much for Dallas Goedert. So he's a guy I feel like is overinflated on this list. I would push him a couple spots down. I like Hunter Henry more than him. I like Jake Ferguson more than him. I'd probably take Goddard over Kyle Pitts, but I think my stomach might turn over and inside out all in once if I had to choose between the two of them. But nevertheless, defending Super Bowl champion. So congratulations to him. I'm looking for more out of my tight end position besides, 5 targets a game, 4 receptions a game, and 2 touchdowns in a season. I need more out of that.
So here's what's frustrating about Dallas Goedert. Games that he is healthy in, he doesn't finish worse than tight end 2, right? Number 22 is the least. Last year, this is last year. He didn't finish worse than tight end 2, 22 overall. But the problem is, you only got 10 games with him last year. He missed 7 games. He misses games. He is health averse. It is now something you have to contend with when you consider Dallas Goedert is how much of Dallas Goedert am I going to have? And then to that point, if you're going to take Dallas Goedert as the 15th tight end off the board, are you taking a tight end earlier to kind of defend against that? Or are you trying to take somebody later and then you're potentially losing out? So like he's in this weird spot where you have to commit to a draft strategy that you may not want to commit to because you have to defend against the handful of games that he's likely going to miss throughout the course of the season. So it's a very unique spot, and I don't know that I like it at all. And so like for that, I think I'm out on Dallas Goedert this year just because it is not a headache I want to deal with.
Right. And yeah, when we talked about this a little bit, when we talked about Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia offense is far more, far more focused on the running side of things than throwing the ball, right? Like this is one of those that I don't know that we necessarily see a giant uptick to the point where the Eagles offense is going to put up 4,000 yards through the air. Like I don't see that happening. I think at most we're seeing 3,500. And when you start seeing that dispersed around and distributed there, Dallas Goedert is going to be kind of that odd man looking out, right? Like when all said and done, he's coming off the board. Currently, it's as that tight end 15, and I think that's about where his ceiling is going to be. Is that low end, that upper end tight end 2, right? Like maybe he gets up to 13, 14, 15. But that's not a game that I want to play on this one. This is a guy that I would look to potentially stream if having to, but as a certainly not looking to put him on my roster as my first tight end if I'm going kind of a later tight end strategy. And a guy that I'm not necessarily even want as my backup, just from the standpoint of how much time we've seen Dallas Goedert miss over the season. So this is a deal where if the last 3-4 seasons, like you're lucky if you get to 14 games on this one. So and from that aspect, I think I'm kind of out because again, I think that you're drafting him about at his ceiling. Any other thoughts on Dallas Goedert? All righty, let's go ahead and head on over to Dalton Kincaid. And Dalton Kincaid last year's 44 receptions, 73 targets, 448 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Thoughts on Dalton Kincaid?
So Kincaid might be my new Kyle Pitts as far as how I felt about Kyle Pitts until last year. So he's another guy I'm interested in buying the bounce. Like it was a disappointing year, but I like drafting him at the bottom of tight end 1, beginning of tight end 2 level, more so than the top 5 tight end premium that you kind of had to spend on him last year. So there's a bit of value built in. We're gonna see how it flies with him. So missed some games last year, only got 13 games in, so that definitely added into it. He was trying to play through injury, it didn't work out. But I'm going to give this one more shot with Dalton Kincaid here, at least for the now. But his schedule this year is pretty conducive as far as a tight end schedule here, at least on paper. So he has some good matchups all through the heart of the season and leading into the playoffs, which I like a lot, right? If you need that end of season run, he could be one of those guys kind of making his way there. So maybe with the way Buffalo kind of spreads it out, maybe, he's not going to finish inside the top 10, but at tight end 14 coming off the board, I think I can live with that with Dalton Kincaid, even as my first guy, knowing that I will go back through and then draft, maybe a Hunter Henry behind him, right? And you just kind of pick your 2 guys a little bit closer in. So I take a Hunter Henry behind Dalton Kincaid, and if I got to swap them out and play kind of musical tight ends between the 2, I feel pretty confident I can do that.
Yeah, I'm torn on Dalton Kincaid just because it was such a disappointing year last year. And everybody was, we were thinking about, who is Josh Allen going to throw to? Stephon Diggs is gone. Like, what are they going to do? And they did just fine, right? And Dalton Kincaid wasn't necessarily a huge part of that. So I think obviously they want to get him more involved, and he is clearly the pass catcher of the 2 tight ends that they have, right? Dawson Knox is a run blocker. He is in there to block. So it's so hard because they do have, like, Josh Allen has proven that he can connect with these receivers, and it didn't necessarily need to involve Dalton Kincaid. So I'm torn on it. I think you do have to have a strategy, like you were saying, Kevin, of what you need to do to play off of when you take it. But
he needs to focus, right? Part of Dalton Kincaid's problem was Dalton Kincaid. He had too many drops. And
that, I mean, that's
it's a thing.
While an easy fix, right? Not an easy fix either. Like you get the yips and it's over for you. Like that's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing that can plague you. So I think that if you're going to draft him, you got to have a strategy along with it. Same with Dallas Goedert, right? Like we're in this area where like, yes, these guys can go and have big weeks, but you have to defend against the fact that they're going to just lay absolute duds for you on more than one occasion. So probably best ball. He's a great asset in best ball, but again, it's one of those that you're going to have to commit to the bit if you're taking him in a redraft league.
Right. I do think that we see a little bit of a return to form, right, of that rookie season this coming year, right? Do I think that we see him get all the way back up to 73 receptions and almost 700 yards? No, I don't. I don't see him getting quite that far up there, but I think that it wouldn't be. I think it would be realistic to see him around probably 60 receptions, kind of right in the middle between those two seasons, right? I don't think we see him get back up to about 700 yards, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him to get to like 6 and probably add a few more touchdowns into the mix there as well, right? So, when it's all said and done, that's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 600 yards, about 60 receptions, and probably about 3-4 touchdowns. So I do think that we see a little bit of a bounce back on this one. And if we do see the bounce back and getting up to that, we probably see him finish kind of right there around that tight end 12, 13, 14. So this is one of those that I feel like you're kind of drafting what you get in this one. I don't know that there's a ton of looking at it, I'm not seeing a ton of huge upside on this one where we see this kind of out of nowhere, top 5 finish on the season. But I think that you're also kind of drafting him. But I don't necessarily see the inverse of that happening either, where it's a super disappointing season and you draft him at tight end 14, but he finishes tight end 30. Like, I think that you're going to get pretty close to what you drafted there, and the range of outcomes I'm seeing kind of in that tight end 12 to 15 range. Any other thoughts here on Dalton Kincaid? All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Tucker Kraft. And Tucker Kraft last year, 50 receptions, 70 targets, 707 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Tucker Kraft?
I don't know what to make of Tucker Kraft. Like, he just kind of silently gets this done. So rewind 365 days ish. We weren't quite sure on Tucker Kraft because Luke Musgrave, right? Luke Musgrave started hot, got injured. Kraft kind of came on and then kind of kept the lead job. And we weren't sure if that was going to handle the same through 2024. It did. And he quietly finished inside the top 10 in half-point PPR scoring. This is one of the situations, because Green Bay does kind of just shotgun affect the ball out to all the different pass catchers. It's actually a benefit to the tight end. No, he's not being hyper focused on like a Travis Kelce was a couple years ago, but he's going to see consistent targets week in and week out. He's a red zone look for Jordan Love. So I don't mind it. It's probably it's probably a bit of an uneasy feeling. Like, if I want kind of consistency, I'm probably going to lean Kraft over Dalton Kincaid. But if I want upside, then I'm probably going to go Kincaid. That type of thing. But overall, there's nothing wrong with this guy. If you're waiting on tight end, if he's your first one, there's nothing wrong with this. Again, wait an extra 2 rounds and then pair him up with somebody further down the board. Pair Kraft up with a Mike Gesicki. Like, you can feel confident with that going into there. You don't have to only keep one tight end on your redraft roster. A lot of people do, but if you're waiting on tight end, you kind of want to. That way, you have that instant pivot. And if one guy breaks out and you need to make a roster spot, then you're able to do something like that. So I don't mind him. I'm definitely grabbing a guy behind him if he's my first tight end. And I do think it's complete overkill if he's your second tight end, because more often than not, you're not going to be starting two in your lineup every week if you're drafting a George Kittle. All right. If you're drafting George Kittle, you're not going to follow that up with Tucker Kraft. Same thing with Trey McBride.
Yeah, I think the craziest part about Tucker Kraft is that, like what you said, Kevin, it was so sneaky what he did, because he didn't have a double-digit target week at all last year, and yet he finished his tight end 8.5 point. Like that's so impressive. One, I think the biggest thing is his availability, right? We just got done kind of talking about guys who maybe aren't available all the time. So Tucker Kraft's availability, my high school football coach used to say, your best ability is availability. And so I think that plays into it. And then just the fact that it is, kind of a steady, constant, he makes the most of his targets. I mean, which means he's getting quality targets, right? It's not like they're just throwing the ball his way and he's the receiver in the area. Like, he's getting quality targets. He's getting balls thrown to him that he's going to catch, or that he has a really good shot at catching. So I think this is a safe play, right? This is the sneaky safe play if you want to have your flashy tight end that you have a little later on. That's fine. But like, Tucker Kraft is a very safe play that you can this is a guy that I have no problem just being like, all right, here we go. Set it and forget it. It may not win you a week in and week out, but I don't think he's going to lose you any weeks because he's not being overly productive. But he's going to contribute to your roster.
Yeah, there's certainly some upside for Tucker Kraft. One of the things that does concern me a little bit, right? So Luke Musgrave, certainly came into the season as the Packers tight end one. On that one, injury kind of derailed that. Yes, Tucker Kraft certainly kind of stepped up, and we saw some good things in Luke Musgrave's absence. However, it does make me a little concerned of where that really plays out for the pecking order when the season starts and how they go through it. Right. Not only that, but the Packers were one of the heaviest run offenses last season in that. Do we see them continue that trend? Do we see them, potentially switch back and go a little bit more towards a little bit more pass centric? Because you're right. Like he very quietly got there, but he very quietly got there on not many targets, right? Like this is a guy that averaged about 4 targets a game last season. And he just happened to make the most of it, coming down with a whole lot of catches on that, a great catch percentage. 14 yards per reception for a tight end is certainly up there, and then 7 touchdowns. Like I do see several of these things being very hard to duplicate on this one, because at this point, I think we probably see him closer to maybe 50 receptions, 500 yards, and maybe 5 touchdowns, which would be a drastic hit to that overall performance there. So Tucker Kraft is a guy that at this point I'm willing to be wrong on. I think it's probably the way that I'm looking at this one. Does he have the ability to have a sneaky finish and sneaky upside and get up there into even tight end 6? Yeah, there's certainly the possibility of that. But there's also, I think, just as strong a possibility that we see him finish his tight end 20, 24 when the season's all said and done. So the range of outcomes that I'm seeing with this one lead me a little bit more hesitant on Tucker Kraft. Any other thoughts on Tucker Kraft? All righty. Well, that does take us down to the end of the tight ends that we're talking about tonight. Any other thoughts? Any final thoughts that we want to hit up before we call it a night?
No, thanks for tuning in. Right, going through these rankings, getting into the fun part of the season. So, don't forget to please go to the YouTube and hit like and subscribe, so that way you get the notifications when we're going live for you every Tuesday night. But yeah, good luck as we just start to scratch the surface in best ball drafting season. So, enjoy, because by the time we meet next week, baseball is going to be the only like live
You're
baseball and
right.
golf. Yeah, like when we meet next week, the hockey's done, basketball
Still
will be
auto
done.
racing. I'm still
So
good. We got
racing,
F1 still.
golf, and baseball. So we're gonna have a lot of football talk because
for these Colorado fans, might as well not play baseball.
amen.
Yeah,
Hey, just think if they adopted my 54 game season, that would already be done.
they would be lucky to get to 54. They would be lucky.
A season would already be over. Would
Yeah, mercifully. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll get to these top half of the tight ends next week.
Right. Real quick before we go, Jay did chime in here in the chat saying thinks that Laporta is way too high. So many weapons the Lions have, unless some injuries comes up, don't see much upside. Think Njoku and Ingram will do better on that one. And Jay, we're going to talk about Laporta next week when we get into the tight ends 1 through 12 on that one. So make sure you tune in and we'll see if we agree or not on this one. But again, to echo the same sentiments, appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in. But that's going to do it for us tonight. And he's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.